I do love me some Metroid, as Jesse said. I've rambled and rambled. So this news comes from GoNintendo.com, who actually cites Eurogamer. So it's news within news.
Yes.
Internet rumors this week pegged Bandai Namco as being the mystery studio behind Metroid Prime 4's development, something multiple sources have now confirmed to Eurogamer as being accurate. Specifically, the highly anticipated Nintendo Switch exclusive is being developed by Bandai Namco Studios Singapore, which we understand is lead studio on the game in collaboration with Nintendo. That's the article. That's the whole thing. So
riveting article.
Yeah. This kind of goes along with. I've heard people talk about this in terms of Bandai Namco helped a lot on the most recent Super Smash Brothers, which is one of Nintendo's.
That's how they got Pac-Man in.
Yeah. So there was a lot of people thinking, like, why would Nintendo trust this company with a series like Metroid? But then you think about, well, they helped on the newest Smash Brothers game. And if Nintendo's willing to let them have control of one of their biggest, best-selling game franchises, which is Smash Brothers, why wouldn't they trust them with Metroid, which comparatively doesn't sell well at all. Like, that's why there was a long gap between the older Metroid games and Metroid Prime, and then after Metroid Prime 3 there was the gap between then and, well, we still haven't gotten like a real Metroid Prime game. But the reason that they aren't as common as like Zelda or Mario is that the series, even with the Prime series, doesn't sell that well. So with this, Nintendo, I don't see them as it being Nintendo taking a risk letting Bandai Namco develop this new game, if that is what's going on, because if the series hasn't sold that great before, then they're not going to really lose anything financially if it doesn't do well, because the best selling games still haven't sold well compared to like Zelda and Mario and stuff. So basically, if Nintendo's willing to trust them with Smash Brothers, which is one of their highest selling franchises, then obviously they're going to trust them with something that doesn't make nearly as much money as Metroid. Not saying Metroid is bad, because I'm a fan of Metroid. It's just factually it doesn't sell nearly as well as some of the other franchises, which is why we don't get a new Metroid every single year like Mario. So I just wanted to give that tidbit in there.
And let's also remember that Retro was the kind of the same situation when they took on Prime, like the original Metroid Prime, because they weren't really a well-known studio, and people were like, why is Nintendo taking this huge risk trusting this other studio? And arguably, Nintendo and Namco have a way better relationship than Nintendo did with Retro when Retro started with Metroid Prime. So it's, I don't know, like, and then Mercury Stream just did the last Metroid game. Again, huge risk, another third-party game or developer. So it's, it's not uncommon for them to outsource their Metroid games. They pretty much haven't made their own Metroid in-house since Super Metroid. So yeah.
Well, right. I mean, you also have to think, too, that I think Prime probably would have been more pinnacle if it had more of a storyline focus, but it never really was that. It was, more on just a continuous flow of action and gameplay. But they also, which I think is incredibly underrated, is you have to remember they worked on Star Fox Assault with them as well. Namco wasn't partnered with that. And to be honest, that's probably, I hate to say it, that's probably my favorite, I don't hate to say it, but it's probably my favorite Star Fox game. Great mix of story, great mix of gameplay and multiplayer. I had siblings and friends always over at the house, and that was one of our favorite games to play. And I'm talking, like we had like 10, 11 kids over rotating in and out, like if you came in last or third or fourth place, like you're getting rotated out. So just a great game. So I think kind of knowing that on top of Smash, I think that kind of puts it underneath the belt even more of, I think this is going to be a good result. Obviously don't get your hopes up, but still at the same time. And then, we'll see where it goes from there. I would like to see probably more of a prominent storyline in Metroid, this new Prime. probably a little bit more than you have seen a little bit in the previous ones. Just a little bit more focus on that, because it always hasn't been the biggest focus of Metroid compared to like things like Zelda and even Mario in a sense.
All right, so something that I wanted to add in really quick, Ashley. This is some other news that goes with this, so it's not me just interrupting you. This is actual news. But coming, this is sort of a news story that kind of tie into this about the specific team. This comes from Polygon, and it is an update about the same story. It says, specifically, the highly anticipated Nintendo Switch exclusive is being developed by Bandai Namco Studio Singapore, which we understand is the studio lead on the game in collaboration with Nintendo. Eurogamer said the studio houses some former LucasArts Singapore staff who previously worked, among other things, the ambitious canceled Star Wars 1313. Now, if you remember Star Wars 1313, that was the story-based, Uncharted-esque, in terms of the way that it played. It was supposed to be like an Uncharted-like gameplay story, but it was Star Wars. It was canceled, and apparently the team that's working on Metroid is also the team that worked on this game, which means if they use any of the same art style or gameplay mechanics, then it's going to be the most realistic looking Metroid game that we are going to get, because the Star Wars 1313 looked absolutely amazing. So like it was essentially on par with how realistic, even though they kind of have a bad name because of the loot crates, but Star Wars Battlefront 2 looks amazing. So if you could imagine a Metroid game, probably not on that level because that's for PlayStation 4 and stuff, but something taking as much advantage of the power that's within the Nintendo Switch as it can. So there's a lot of hope that this game isn't just going to be like another toony-ish game from Nintendo. It likely going to be just as graphically intense as other first-person shooters that we're used to. But yeah, sorry, continue, Ashley.
Well, actually, I just wanted to ask a question. Was Metroid Other M produced by Retro?
Like, was Ninja.
Oh, then Ninja. Never mind, because I was about to say that
I'll be back
if Retro did make Other M, then that would probably, them switching game studios is probably a good move, because the last Metroid, like, official, like, huge console Metroid game that we all know about, Other M. So
let's not go there, because if anybody knows me, I'm a very high advocate for Other M.
Then never. Then I'm sorry. Then, well, I'm just saying that I think that Bandai Namco taking on the lead is a safe move, and I'm not saying that that's a bad thing. I think playing the safe route is very good, especially with a franchise like Metroid, because it's been slouching in the sales throughout the years. And I think that having some company that produced something like Smash I think is a very good move business-wise. Now, do I think that Bandai Namco can do Metroid justice? Well, they made Smash. I mean, I think that Smash 4 was a pretty good game, and I think that it's just a matter of will it please the fans rather than it being good. Because I have a very good feeling that Bandai Namco will do very well at producing a Metroid game. It's just a matter of will it help the sales and will it help the fans? And that's a very good question that we need to think about more than rather is this a very good move switching it over to Bandai Namco rather than will it be good business-wise? Yes, since it's a safe move business-wise, and will the fans be okay with a studio like Bandai Namco taking on such a seemingly precious franchise as Metroid?
Yeah, I have full faith in it. typically whenever a franchise is coming back like this, like there's been other Metroid Prime games, Metroid Prime Hunters, was it on the 3DS? So there has been other games in the series, but there hasn't been like an actual new Metroid Prime game like this. So whenever a franchise comes back, the studio or publisher doesn't want to put that much money into it unless they know it'll make a lot of money. So they might put a smaller budget into bringing a franchise back or making a brand new franchise, but then if it sells well, they'll put even more money into the sequel. So with them coming out with this Metroid Prime 4, not knowing how well it'll sell, especially compared to older Metroid games, which didn't sell that well, I would be afraid that maybe they could make a great game, but because of possibly not that big of a budget, they would not be able to finish everything that they would actually need to finish. So they kind of have to scale back in terms of what they can achieve. But the other side to that is we see a lot of indie games selling a lot better than they do on other consoles, even with the larger games. We just there was a report saying that earlier I read Dragon Ball Xenoverse 2, which was on the PlayStation 4 for a long time, and the PlayStation 4 has more consoles sold than Switch or Xbox, especially the Nintendo Switch. But the Nintendo Switch has already outsold more copies of Dragon Ball Xenoverse 2 on the Switch than the PlayStation 4 has copies. And that's on a console that has a lot fewer units and has been out for a lot less time. So I think, or at least I'm hoping, Nintendo will look at that and see, well, games that are on other consoles are selling better on this, so the fans of the Nintendo Switch, like, people are wanting to buy games for the Nintendo Switch. So I'm hoping they look at that, and instead of thinking, well, this game hasn't sold well in the past, so we're not going to give it that big of a budget because we don't know if we'll make back all of that money, I hope they look at the fact that people that own Switch want to play games, and there's not really a game like Metroid on the Nintendo Switch. Like, there's a few shooters and stuff, but there's nothing like what Metroid's going to be. So I hope, again, that they look at that and see that there is a lot of potential there and give the game the budget that it needs. That way it doesn't feel like it was just shoved out or was only given half of the respect that it needed for development.
Right.
So
I think at this point, to be honest, I feel like what the Switch has done very well is in itself instilling a sense of hype, and not just through its marketing and its amazing commercials, because I mean, I don't think anybody could deny that Nintendo has just upgraded their commercial, you know, like, quality so much. Like, you look at Wii U and how they're trying to sell their commercials, and then look at Switch and how they're selling the commercials and all their games. It's so different. So I think that the Switch already has enough hype as it is, but then, I mean, you take a look at all the different reactions, even just posted for Metroid Prime, essentially, like, just a picture, you know, of how many people are responding. I think right now it's not necessarily, I don't think Nintendo would, you know, kind of like half do a game, because I feel like most of their games, you know, like, what is the quote that Miyamoto always says, like, a rushed game is forever a bad game, but, you know, it's okay to delay a game and have it be, you know, a good game. I don't think they're afraid necessarily to take their time with games, and that's why we haven't seen anything for so long. But I think at this point, it's pretty much like the hype is going to sell it. It's going to give it, I think, more of a boost than if it didn't have it. I think at this point, it's kind of like, when it comes out, how is the reputation going to uphold? This could be really, really good for them and their reputation, or it could be really, really bad. So I think from that point, it's like they're on this. I think it's going to be almost like, I don't want to say a milestone, but more of like I feel like we're on the tipping point of people will either be really happy or really, you know, disappointed. And I think that people will buy the game. It's just, are they going to be happy with it after the fact? Kind of like No Man's Sky. Like, it had so much hype, much hype, and so many people bought the game, and then, like, so many people returned it, you know, like, after the fact. And it was very unfortunate. There's some people, like, they still kind of play it, you know, and there's been content added in after the fact. But you know, it's just like, I don't think it's gonna come to that point to where it'll be like that, but that's kind of where they are right now. Is the hype, I feel like, will sell it pretty well. It's just the delivery of how people feel, and like not coming in necessarily with expectations of this is gonna be exactly like the first 3 primes, because maybe they are wanting to change things up. You know, if people thought the other M was, you know, too sappy or too emotional, and you know, some people thought that Prime, you know, could have delivered on a little bit more, you know, on some facets, maybe like find that happy middle, you know. That's what I think.
All right. And does anyone else have any final thoughts on this before we move on to the next topic? Really quick, going around just a few sentences. What's everyone, like, their hopes or expectations for Metroid Prime 4? Whether it's a new mechanic they add in, some crazy way the game interacts with what's it called, the HD rumble for the Joy-Cons. So just something that you are hoping this has, even like a Nintendo Labo tie-in. I don't know.
I think it would be really cool to have some tie-in with the Joy-Cons actually being used like for more than just a controller, like you're using the gyroscopic aiming in some way, and you know, HD Rumble would be really cool if they actually used it in a way that is actually unique to HD Rumble. That's not just ice cubes or balls shaking around. And I don't know, I kind of expect it to be something of a return to form of to like the first 3 Prime games, because we kind of saw the return to form of 2D Metroids with Samus Returns. So I think we'll have sort of a return to form in the same way with Prime. But I would like to see some new mechanics, because with Samus Returns as an example, adding in like the melee counter as a new mechanic really shook the gameplay up in a way that made it a lot more fun. So I'd like to see them do something, not necessarily the same thing, but something. Yeah, that's all I got.
Oh, did the stream go down? The stream went down on my screen.
Oh, no. Sorry, it's back up. Sorry.
Oh no, you're good.
Okay.
So, I think what I would really want a Metroid Prime 4 would probably, for the sake of, so we always wonder what Samus was like. We got kind of a taste of that in Other M. I think from this, it would be kind of, where's the placement going to be? You know, like how, like, is this going to be a Prime game that's going to be like placed way later on, or is this going to be, you know, like kind of close to the trilogy? I would assume it'd probably be closer than further away, but I would definitely just like more development on the characters and more interaction. I think with everything else going on, not necessarily just about exploring, because like from what I remember of just the first Prime, you know, it's pretty much like you literally felt like you were isolated like the entire game, and a lot of people love that. But I would just like to see a little bit more, you know, even on that base of just being a little bit more interpersonal. For me, I'm really big on storylines and stuff like that, but I think Metroid would do well to have a little bit more depth to it.
All right, and you, Ashley?
I'm probably gonna make a lot of people mad with this, but I've never played a Metroid game in my life, so I can't really have a legitimate, honest opinion on this. An honest opinion about this, but the only thing that I wish for in this game is that it makes people happy and that people can enjoy Metroid again. All I want is just for people to be happy, that's all. I don't really have a legitimate game. Well, maybe a gameplay advice is that all of the developers these days are going after like open world stuff. Like Zelda, we have Breath of the Wild. Horizon Zero Dawn is an open world game. There are rumors that the next Pokemon game will be open world, you know, and I think that maybe Metroid could go down that road too. I don't know, it's just an idea. It's a half-baked idea.
No, that's great. Especially
that'd be interesting.
Going back to the everyone being happy, because I think that's what everybody wants. Is just not even Metroid related, just everyone to be happy. So, but with me personally, I'm going to kind of give a bit of a different answer with this. Okay, so a while back when Metroid Prime originally came out, the game that it was being compared to the most was Halo. So
Yes.
I'm hoping that now we've seen games like Destiny kind of take the spot that Halo once had, and I'm a huge fan of Destiny. So my hope for this is if this game sells really well, then maybe not the next game like Metroid Prime 5 or whatever the follow-up to Metroid Prime 4 would be, but I'm hoping at some point that it does so well that we get to explore more than just the continued story that we've gotten. Like, open it up to where it is some sort of multiplayer focused experience, more akin to Destiny.
Cool.
Like, I think if you just took what, and this is just me, like if I could blow out some candles on a birthday cake, I would, because I really like Metroid and I really like Destiny, and I would love to see, like, obviously maybe not Nintendo, but if it's a different studio outside of Nintendo, like Bandai Namco or some other studio that is more used to making that type of game, if you could just take the style of game that Destiny is and put it inside the Metroid world to where you're not just playing as Samus as a bounty hunter, but you can pick or create your own bounty hunter and then explore the different worlds in Metroid to go out and in the same way in Destiny you can go to different planets to do different missions. If you could do that but in the world of Metroid, to where you're just going to the different planets in that universe and then doing stuff, I think that would be really cool. But that's like 5-10 years away. What I'm hoping for this one would be really cool is if I just want it to, because we have Mario, which is like the cartoony art style. We have Breath of the Wild, which is
an anime
it's
style.
essentially like playing an anime. There hasn't been any Nintendo games to really take advantage of the power of the Nintendo Switch to give us something realistic. A lot of people think that because the Switch isn't as powerful as the PlayStation 4 or whatever, it can't give us something that's realistic. But even if you look at the PlayStation 3 or Xbox 360, those were able to give us graphics that were realistic. If you go back and look at like Battlefield or Call of Duty, the Switch is a lot more powerful than what those consoles are. So if you look at how good something could potentially look on the PlayStation 3, then you can automatically assume that something on the Switch could look even better, because we've seen that with games that have been ported over, brought up, like Skyrim on the Switch, as an example, looks a lot better than it did on the PlayStation 3. Like, it's in that half ground between like where the old generation was and the new one. So if Nintendo would be able to, because I think Metroid would be the game that you could do this with, if you could make it that realistic first-person shooter-esque style game that people that are fans of Call of Duty or these other first-person shooters, like, that could be the game to bring them over. Maybe they don't want something as playful or colorful as Mario. They don't want a huge open-world adventure game like Zelda. But if they're used to just playing Call of Duty, Battlefield, Overwatch, or whatever, and they look at the Switch and they don't really see anything that could pull them over, I think Metroid could be that game if Nintendo does it right. So as great as the Nintendo Switch is selling, there are still the people that may not be interested in it, and I think Metroid could potentially be that game that brings over...
It could be their Call of Duty.
Yeah, like all of the people that are the casual gamers that just play Call of Duty and stuff, I think this could be the game that brings them in. Are you all set, Daniel?
Oh yeah.
Go ahead and take us into our next story.